Emma Wright had been living on Kelvar Prime for 3 months now. The planet was unlike anything she had ever seen back on Earth. Strange blue plants grew along the streets, and buildings made of smooth white stone reached up toward 2 small moons that hung in the purple sky. She was a lieutenant in the Human Diplomatic Corps, which sounded more impressive than it actually was. Most days, she just explained human customs to confused aliens and made sure nobody accidentally insulted anyone else. The Kelvari owned this planet. They looked like giant cats that walked on 2 legs with fur that shimmered in the sunlight and eyes that seemed to be made of crystal. They had sharp claws that could slide in and out of their fingers, and when they were happy, they made a rumbling sound deep in their chests. Emma had learned to like them over the past few months. They were proud creatures, very concerned with honor and respect, but they were also fair and surprisingly kind once you got to know them. The diplomatic outpost where Emma worked sat on the edge of a large city. The Galactic Assembly had chosen Kelvar Prime as neutral ground, a place where 17 different alien species could meet and talk without fighting. Wars had torn apart this part of space for hundreds of years, and everyone was tired of it. The Assembly was supposed to keep the peace, though Emma sometimes wondered if it was really working. On this particular morning, Emma had decided to take a walk through the marketplace. It was her day off, and she enjoyed browsing the stalls that sold strange fruits and handmade jewelry. The Kelvari merchants had warmed up to her over time. At first, they had been suspicious of the human, but Emma always smiled and asked questions about their goods, and eventually they started to trust her. The market was busy today. Aliens of all kinds moved through the narrow streets between the stalls. There were tall, thin creatures with too many arms, short, furry beings that looked like walking carpets, and even a few other humans from the outpost. The air smelled like spices and something sweet that Emma could not quite identify. Merchants called out their prices. Children ran between the stalls playing games, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing a musical instrument that sounded like wind chimes. Emma was looking at a display of carved stones when she heard the growling. It was a low, dangerous sound that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Every instinct in her human brain screamed at her to run, to get away from whatever was making that noise. But Emma had learned to ignore her instincts around aliens. What seemed threatening to a human was often just normal behavior for another species. She turned toward the sound and saw a small Kelvari in the middle of the walkway. The child could not have been more than 5 years old by human standards, though Emma knew that Kelvari aged differently. The cub was crouched low, its fur standing up along its spine, and it was clutching something that glowed with soft blue light. An older Kelvari, probably the cub's grandmother, stood a few steps away. She was trying to talk to the child in a calm voice, reaching out one hand very slowly, but the cub just growled louder and pulled the glowing object closer to its chest. Emma moved closer to get a better look. The object was a toy, she realized, some kind of ball or orb that pulsed with light. It must have been expensive, judging by the way it glimmered. The cub clearly did not want to give it up. Other aliens in the marketplace were giving the scene a wide space. Even the Kelvari adults seemed nervous. Emma watched as the grandmother took a small step forward and the cub's claws came out. The child was not trying to hurt anyone, Emma thought. It was just scared that someone would take its toy away. She had seen this before, not with alien cubs, but with human children. Her little brother had been exactly like this when he was young, possessive and stubborn about his favorite toys. The more you tried to take something away, the more he would fight to keep it. Emma made a decision. Her training manual would definitely not approve, but sometimes the manual was wrong. She walked straight toward the Kelvari cub, her steps confident and unhurried. The grandmother's eyes went wide, and she started to say something, probably a warning. But Emma kept walking. The cub saw her coming. Its crystal eyes locked onto Emma, and the growling got even louder. Emma did not slow down. She had learned something important during her 3 months on Kelvar Prime. Aliens could smell fear just like animals could. If you acted afraid, they would treat you like prey. If you acted calm and confident, they would respond differently. Emma reached the cub and did something that made every Kelvari in the marketplace freeze. She bent down and plucked the glowing toy right out of the cub's hands. The growling stopped instantly. The cub stared at her, its mouth hanging open in shock. Around them, Emma could feel the tension in the air, could sense every eye in the market watching to see what would happen next. Emma stood up and looked at the toy. It was beautiful, she had to admit. The light pulsed in a gentle rhythm, and when she moved it, the color shifted from blue to green to purple. She smiled and tossed the toy up in the air, catching it easily. The toy made a musical chiming sound when it moved. She tossed it again, higher this time, and caught it with both hands. Then she looked down at the cub, who was still frozen in surprise. Emma knelt down and held out the toy. Not to the grandmother, to the cub itself. The young Kelvari blinked its crystal eyes. It looked at the toy, then at Emma, then back at the toy, slowly, carefully, as if it could not quite believe what was happening. The cub reached out and took the glowing orb. It held the toy close to its chest again, but this time there was no growling. The tension melted out of its small body, and its fur settled back down flat. Emma reached out and gently patted the cub on the head, right between its small ears. The cub made a surprised chirping sound, but it did not pull away. "There you go," Emma said softly, knowing the cub probably could not understand English. "It's okay. Nobody's going to take your toy." She stood up and nodded to the grandmother, who was staring at her with an expression Emma could not quite read. Then Emma simply walked away, heading back toward the stalls of carved stones as if nothing unusual had happened. Behind her, she heard the grandmother speaking to the cub in the Kelvari language, her voice gentle and relieved. The marketplace slowly came back to life, the moment of tension passing as quickly as it had arrived. Emma did not think much about the incident as she finished her shopping. She bought a carved stone that looked like a bird, chatted with the merchant about the weather, and eventually headed back toward the diplomatic outpost. What she did not see were the 3 Kelvari watching her from a balcony above the marketplace. They were old, their fur marked with silver, and they wore robes that marked them as important members of Kelvari society. They had witnessed everything. The 3 elders looked at each other, their whiskers twitching in what might have been surprise or approval. One of them spoke quietly to the others, and they all nodded. They had just witnessed something remarkable. A human, a creature they barely knew, had handled a possessive Kelvari cub with the kind of natural skill that even experienced Kelvari sometimes lacked. They would remember this. They would remember Emma Wright, because sometimes the smallest moments could change everything. Sometimes a simple act of confidence and kindness could mark someone as special, and sometimes taking a toy from a growling cub could be the first step toward something much larger. Emma walked home through the alien streets, completely unaware that she had just done something that would alter the course of her entire life. She was thinking about dinner, about the report she needed to write tomorrow, about the comfortable bed waiting for her back at the outpost. She had no idea that 2 weeks from now, she would receive a summons that would change everything, that she would be asked to do something impossible, something dangerous, something that could save millions of lives or start a war that would destroy everything, all because she knew how to handle a child with a toy. The 2 moons rose higher in the purple sky, and Emma Wright walked on, just another human in an alien world, living her quiet life and doing her simple job for now. 2 weeks passed in the usual routine. Emma wrote reports, attended meetings where aliens argued about trade agreements, and tried to learn more of the Kelvari language. She was getting better at understanding the purring sounds they made when they were pleased, and the sharp clicks that meant disagreement. The summons came on a Tuesday morning. Emma was drinking coffee in the outpost cafeteria when a messenger arrived. The messenger was a young Kelvari male wearing armor that gleamed like polished silver. He carried a data tablet that glowed with formal symbols. "Lieutenant Emma Wright?" the messenger asked, his English heavily accented but clear. "That's me," Emma said, setting down her coffee. The messenger held out the data tablet with both hands, a gesture of respect. "The Council of Matriarchs request your presence. You are summoned to the mountain chambers." Emma took the tablet and felt her stomach drop. The Council of Matriarchs was the ruling body of the Kelvari people. They were the oldest, wisest females of the species, and they only got involved in the most important matters. Normal diplomats never met with them directly. "Do you know what this is about?" Emma asked. The messenger shook his head. "I am only the messenger. I know nothing of the Council's business." After he left, Emma went straight to her commanding officer. Captain Lucas Grant was a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been doing diplomatic work for 20 years, and nothing surprised him anymore, except this. "The Council wants to see you?" he asked. turning the tablet over in his hands as if the back might explain things better than the front. "Emma, what have you been doing?" "Nothing," Emma said honestly. "Just the usual work. I haven't done anything that would catch their attention." Lucas frowned at the formal symbols on the tablet. "Well, they want to see you tomorrow at noon. Take someone with you." Security protocol. Emma chose Danny Martinez from the security team. Danny was a corporal with an easy smile and steady hands. He never seemed to get nervous, which was exactly what Emma needed right now. If something went wrong at this meeting, she wanted someone calm beside her. The next morning, they took a transport vehicle to the base of the mountain. The council chambers were carved into the living rock high above the city. The entrance was guarded by cavalry warriors in ceremonial armor, their faces serious and watchful. Inside, the passages were lined with glowing crystals that grew naturally from the walls. Blue and violet light filled the corridors, making Emma feel like she was walking through a dream. The air was cool and smelled like stone and something else, something clean and sharp that she could not name. A guide led them through winding passages until they reached a large circular chamber. 5 Kelvari matriarchs sat on raised platforms arranged in a half-circle. They were ancient, their fur marked with silver and gray, their eyes holding the weight of long years. Emma felt very small and very human standing before them. The central matriarch spoke first. Her voice was deep and seemed to resonate in Emma's chest. The translator device on Emma's collar rendered the words into English. "Lieutenant Emma Wright of Earth. You were observed in the marketplace 14 days ago. Do you remember this day?" Emma's mind raced back. The marketplace. The cub with the toy. That had to be what this was about. "Yes, Elder, I remember." "Tell us what happened." Emma glanced at Danny, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. She turned back to the matriarchs. A young Kelvari was holding a toy and would not let go. The child was growling and showing claws. I took the toy, showed the child it was safe, and gave it back. The situation calmed down. "You took an object from a juvenile displaying possession aggression," the matriarch said slowly, each word careful and measured. "You did this without fear, without injury, and without causing the juvenile to attack. Then you returned the object not to the guardian, but to the juvenile itself. Is this correct?" "Yes, that's what happened." The 5 matriarchs looked at each other. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication that Emma could not read. "Do humans commonly handle possessive young predators this way?" another matriarch asked. Emma thought about every parent dealing with a stubborn toddler, every teacher managing a classroom, every older sibling settling a fight over a toy. In a way, yes. Human children can be very possessive too. We learn how to handle these situations without violence. It's just part of raising children. "Remarkable," the first matriarch murmured. "Tell us, Lieutenant Wright, what do you know of the broken accord?" The sudden change of subject confused Emma. The treaty breakdown between the Kelvari and the Draxian Empire. It happened 200 years ago. Both sides say the other side broke first contact rules. It's in the history files we studied. "The truth is more complicated," the matriarch said, "and the effects reach into today. The Draxian crown prince, heir to their empire, was raised from birth in complete isolation. He was trained only for war. He is brilliant and ruthless. He believes that the Kelvari insulted his family line during the accord negotiations. He has spent 20 years building a military force to get revenge for this insult." Emma felt cold. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't understand why you're telling me this." 3 weeks from now, the Crown Prince will arrive here at Kelvar Prime. The Galactic Assembly has ordered peace negotiations. If these negotiations fail, war will come. A war that will pull in dozens of species through their alliance treaties. A war that could destroy everything we have built. The pieces started to come together in Emma's mind, and she did not like the picture they were forming. "The Crown Prince," the matriarch continued, "is, despite his 20 years and his military rank, essentially a juvenile predator showing possession aggression over his right to revenge. He will not respond to normal diplomatic methods. He sees compromise as weakness. He views negotiation as surrender." "You want me to talk to him?" Emma said, her voice flat. "We want you to do what you did in the marketplace. We want you to take his toy, show him it is not worth fighting over, and give him something better instead." "With respect, Elder, that's crazy. I'm not trained for this. I don't know anything about Draxian psychology." "No," the matriarch agreed. "But you are human. And humans have a strange gift for social dynamics with aggressive young beings. Your species raised itself from scattered tribes into a world civilization by learning to manage conflict without constant killing. You learned to talk down the dangerous child before it became a dangerous adult. Danny leaned close and whispered, "Should I mention that human history has plenty of wars? Or are we pretending we're the peaceful ones right now?" "Quiet," Emma hissed. The matriarch's ears twitched, suggesting she had heard anyway. "We do not claim humans are peaceful, but you learned to control your violence. You built societies that could argue without always killing. That is more than the Draxians have done. Their empire is held together only by strength. When the Crown Prince arrives, he will be a weapon looking for a target. We need someone who can change his aim without breaking him. And if I fail, then war comes. Millions die. The Galactic Assembly falls apart under the pressure of competing alliances. But if you fail, Lieutenant Wright, you will fail no worse than our most experienced diplomats would have. At least you will surprise him. He has never met a human. He will not know what to expect." Emma looked at Danny, who gave her a look that clearly said, "This is way above my pay grade, but I've got your back." She took a deep breath and turned back to the matriarchs. "I'll need everything you know about the Crown Prince, his psychology, his history, his culture. And I want a team I can trust. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it my way." The matriarch's whiskers lifted in what might have been a smile. Agreed. Over the next 3 weeks, Emma barely slept. She assembled her team carefully. Danny Martinez would handle security. Lisa Park, a specialist in alien psychology, would help her understand Draxian body language and behavior. Greg Hayes from communications would manage the technical side of the negotiations. The files on Crown Prince Zakros painted a disturbing picture. The Draxians were a species of reptilian beings with scales and cold blood. They had evolved from ambush hunters on a harsh desert planet. Their society valued strength above everything else. Honor meant more to them than life. Zakros had hatched during troubled times. His mother, the Empress, had died shortly after his birth. The circumstances were suspicious, though the files did not say exactly what happened. His father, the Emperor, had decided to raise Zakros in the old traditional way. The prince grew up alone, taught by military instructors, learning that mercy was weakness and compromise was betrayal. Emma watched video footage from other diplomatic meetings. Zakros moved like a hunter, patient and focused, always watching for threats. He spoke rarely. When he did speak, his words were sharp and cutting. He had walked out of 4 different treaty talks when he felt his honor was questioned. "He's like a loaded gun," Lisa said during one of their planning sessions. "Look at his body language. He never relaxes. His eyes are always moving, always checking for danger. He sees everything as a potential threat." "Great," Danny muttered. "So we're trying to negotiate with someone who thinks everyone is an enemy. What could possibly go wrong?" Emma studied the footage more carefully. There was something about the way Zakros moved, something about how he held himself that reminded. The negotiation chamber felt cold, despite the warm air flowing through the ventilation system. Emma sat with her team at their designated section of the round table, trying to look calm and professional. Inside, her heart was racing. Crown Prince Zakros took his seat directly across from the Kelvari matriarchs. He moved with careful precision, each gesture controlled and measured. His amber eyes swept the room once, cataloging everyone present, before settling into a fixed stare at the lead matriarch. Elder Sareth began with the traditional greeting. She spoke of the long histories of both peoples, acknowledged the pain of past misunderstandings, and expressed hope for renewed friendship between their worlds. Her voice was calm and respectful, each word chosen carefully. Zakros listened without expression. His secondary eyelids flickered occasionally, a sign that Lisa had told Emma meant either boredom or contempt. Maybe both. When Elder Sareth finished, Zakros stood. The movement was fluid and somehow threatening despite its grace. His voice was a low hiss that the translator rendered into flat, formal English. "I am here because the assembly commanded my presence, not because I seek peace with those who dishonored my bloodline. The Kelvari insult of 2 centuries past remains unanswered. Honor demands satisfaction." Emma watched the Kelvari delegation shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was already going badly. "The insult you speak of," Elder Sareth replied carefully, "was a misunderstanding of cultural rules. Our ancestors meant no offense to your family. Intent does not matter. The offense happened. Until it is answered, no treaty can exist between our peoples. What answer would satisfy your honor?" Another matriarch asked. Zakros's eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. Formal acknowledgement of Kelvari wrongdoing. Payment of resources and territory as compensation. And a public apology broadcast across this entire sector of space so everyone knows that the Draxian Empire does not forget when it has been wronged. The demands hung in the air like poison. Emma could see the Kelvari matriarch struggling to maintain their calm. What Zakros was asking for was essentially surrender, a humiliation that would destroy the Kelvari's standing in the Galactic Assembly. That is not acceptable, Elder Sareth said quietly. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Zakros turned toward the door. Emma stood up before she could stop herself. Your Highness, she called out, her voice carrying across the chamber. Zakros stopped. He turned slowly to look at her, surprise clear on his scaled face. Emma was just an observer. She had no authority here. The Draxians had made it clear they did not recognize human diplomatic status. Speak quickly, human, Zakros said. I do not waste time on those without rank. Emma walked around the table, closing the distance between them. She could feel Danny tense behind her, ready to move if things went wrong. But she kept walking until she was standing just a few feet from the Crown Prince. What was the toy? Emma asked. Zakros's head tilted, confusion replacing some of the anger in his expression. What? The thing you're fighting over? This insult, this grievance. What actually happened? Not what the politicians say. Not what the history files claim. What really happened that started all of this? For the first time, Zakros seemed genuinely thrown off balance. It is recorded in the Accord documents. The Kelvari ambassador referred to my ancestor, Emperor Thraxus, as newly emerged, which in our language means immature or childish. I know, I read the files. But here's the thing, Your Highness. The Kelvari translator that day made a mistake. They thought newly emerged was a respectful way to refer to your ancestor's recent rise to power. They were trying to show respect. It wasn't an insult. It was a translation error. Mistakes do not erase offense, don't they? Emma took another step closer. If I step on your tail because I didn't see it in a crowded room, am I attacking you or did I just make a mistake? Intent does not change the action, but it should change your response. Emma crossed her arms, meeting Zakros's amber eyes without flinching. Your Highness, you were raised to be a weapon. I understand that. I've read your history. You grew up alone, trained by soldiers, taught that strength is the only thing that matters. But weapons don't build empires, people do. And people make mistakes. Zakros's scales rippled, a visible sign of agitation. You presume too much, human? Maybe, but let me ask you something. What happens when you get your revenge? Let's say the Kelvari give you everything you're asking for. They humiliate themselves. They pay your price. What do you get out of it besides a brief feeling of satisfaction? I get justice for my bloodline. No, you get revenge. Those aren't the same thing. Justice would be understanding what really happened and moving forward. Revenge is just holding on to anger until it burns everything around you. The chamber was completely silent. Every diplomat, every guard, every observer was frozen, waiting to see what Zakros would do. You know nothing of my life, Zakros said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to hold on to something because you think it defines you. Because you think if you let go, you won't know who you are anymore. Emma paused. That's what this grievance is, isn't it? It's all you have. Your father gave you this anger, this purpose, and you've been holding on to it your whole life because without it, you don't know what you're supposed to be. Zakros stared at her for a long moment. The anger in his eyes was still there, but something else had appeared alongside it. Something that might have been uncertainty. What are you asking of me? He said finally. I'm asking you to put down the toy, Your Highness. This ancient insult, this honor debt, this grievance that's older than you are, it's a toy you've been growling over your entire life. And I'm telling you that if you put it down, I can show you something better. And what would that be? Emma took a breath. This was it. The gambit she and Elder Sareth had discussed in secret. The plan that would either save everything or make things infinitely worse. A future, a real purpose, a chance to be something more than just your father's weapon. Zakros was quiet for several heartbeats. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was harsh and bitter like stones grinding together, but it was real. You stand before me, a human I have never met, and tell me my entire life's purpose is a child's plaything. You have courage. I will grant you that. Or perhaps you are simply foolish. Maybe both, Emma admitted. But that doesn't make me wrong. Zakros looked past her to the Kelvari matriarchs, then back to Emma. My father warned me that other species would try to weaken my resolve with soft words and false promises. He said they would try to make me doubt my purpose. Your father raised you in isolation, Emma said quietly. He trained you to be angry, to be focused on revenge. But he's not here right now, you are, and you get to decide what matters to you, not what your father decided for you 20 years ago, what you decide today. The Draxian Empire does not negotiate from weakness. Nobody's asking you to. I'm asking you to consider whether holding on to this anger actually makes you strong, or if it just makes you predictable, easy to manipulate. Because right now, Your Highness, you're doing exactly what everyone expects. You're playing the part your father wrote for you. Is that really strength? One of Zakros's advisors stood up suddenly. This human insults our prince. We should leave immediately. But Zakros held up one clawed hand, silencing the advisor. His gaze never left Emma's face. You said you could show me something better. Explain. This was the moment. Emma could feel the weight of it, could sense everyone in the room holding their breath. The Galactic Assembly is restructuring its defense forces, Emma said. The Vakari have been raiding colonies along the outer rim. Pirates are getting bolder. The member species need a unified military response, but they can't agree on who should lead it. They need someone who understands warfare, someone who can command respect, someone who isn't afraid to make hard decisions. Zakros's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting I lead this force. I'm suggesting the Assembly would be foolish not to offer you the position. You're one of the best military minds in this sector. You've built a fleet from almost nothing. Your officers are loyal and your tactics are brilliant. The Kelvari don't need an enemy, Your Highness. The Assembly needs a defender. Elder Sareth stood smoothly, as if this was all planned. Maybe it was. Emma wasn't entirely sure anymore. Lieutenant Wright speaks with wisdom, the matriarch said. The council has discussed this possibility. We would formally support Crown Prince Zakros as commander of the Assembly Defense Initiative, provided the current hostilities between our peoples are resolved peacefully. The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Draxian advisors looked shocked. The other matriarchs maintained carefully neutral expressions. Zakros stood very still, processing everything. Emma could almost see the calculations happening behind his amber eyes. This could be a trap, his lead advisor said. They want to bind you with obligations, to make you serve them. Or, Emma said, it's a chance to protect billions of lives instead of avenging a centuries-old mistake, to be remembered for what you build instead of what you destroy, to choose your own purpose. Zakros looked at his advisors, then at the matriarchs, then back at Emma. The silence stretched out until it became almost unbearable. The weeks following the negotiation were chaos. Emma found herself promoted to commander, given an office 3 times the size of her old one, and assigned a staff of 12 people she had never met before. Her job, as far as she could understand it, was to serve as the bridge between Crown Prince Zakros and the human contingent of the Assembly Defense Initiative. It was terrifying. Captain Lucas, Grant had not been happy about losing his best cultural liaison, but he could hardly argue when the Kelvari matriarchs and the Draxian Crown Prince both insisted on her involvement. Emma suspected he was relieved to have her become someone else's problem. Danny Martinez, Lisa Park, and Greg Hayes had all agreed to join her new team. Danny seemed to think the whole situation was hilarious. Lisa was fascinated by the psychological aspects of working with Zakros. Greg was just happy to be involved in something important. The Assembly Defense Initiative was officially established 2 months after the initial negotiation. Crown Prince Zakros was named Supreme Commander, a title that carried both authority and weight. Emma quickly learned that Zakros took his new role very seriously. Too seriously, sometimes. The first time Emma entered Zakros's command center, she found him reviewing tactical reports at 3 a.m, local time. He had not slept in 2 days. His scales looked dull and his movements were slower than usual. Your Highness, you need rest, Emma said, standing in the doorway. Zakros did not look up from his screens. There are 17 separate pirate groups operating along the rim worlds. The Vakari launched 3 raids last week. 2 colony ships went missing near the Broken Nebula. I do not have time for rest. You're not going to be any use to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Draxians can function for 5 days, without sleep when necessary. Just Because you can doesn't mean you should. Emma walked over and manually shut down one of his screens. The reports will still be here in 6 hours. Go sleep. Zakros finally looked at her, his amber eyes tired and irritated. You forget yourself, Commander, right? I am your superior officer. And I'm your human liaison, which means part of my job is making sure you don't work yourself to death. Now go sleep. Or I'll have Lisa explain to you in excruciating detail why sleep deprivation impairs decision-making ability. She's been waiting for an excuse to give that lecture. For a moment, Emma thought Zakros might argue. Then his shoulders sagged slightly and he stood. 6 hours, he said. Then I returned to work. Deal. As the weeks turned into months, Emma began to understand Zakros better. He was brilliant, there was no question about that. His tactical mind could see patterns in data that others missed. He could coordinate resources across dozens of star systems and never lose track of the details. But he was also deeply uncertain about everything that was not military strategy. Social situations confused him. Casual conversation seemed to make him uncomfortable. He did not understand jokes, and he struggled with the concept that not every disagreement was a challenge to his authority. Emma found herself in the strange position of teaching a crown prince how to interact with other people. You can't threaten to execute someone just because they disagreed with your supply allocation plan, Emma said after one particularly tense staff meeting. The plan was sound. The officer's objection was based on emotion, not logic, Zakros replied. Maybe, but he had a point about the medical supplies. You were prioritizing ammunition over medicine. In warfare, ammunition saves more lives than medicine. This isn't warfare. These are colonies trying to rebuild after pirate raids. They need medical supplies to treat the injured. Zakros was quiet for a moment, his claws tapping against his desk. I did not consider that perspective. That's why you have advisors. We're here to show you perspectives you might miss. And if I had executed him, I would not have heard his perspective. Exactly. Zakros tilted his head in a gesture Emma had learned meant he was processing new information. This is more complicated than battle tactics. Welcome to leadership, Emma said with a slight smile. The real test came 4 months into Zakros's command. The Vakari launched a major assault on a colony world called Haven's Rest. The attack was coordinated and brutal, with 12 warships descending on the poorly defended planet. Thousands of civilians were at risk. Zakros had to make a decision. He could send the full Defense Initiative fleet, which would guarantee victory but leave other systems vulnerable. Or he could send a smaller force and risk failure. Emma watched him wrestle with the choice for 6 hours. He pulled up maps, ran simulations, consulted with his officers. But in the end, he was alone with the decision. Finally, he called Emma to his office. What would you do? He asked. It's not my decision to make, I know. But I want your opinion, as a human, as someone who sees things differently than I do. Emma looked at the tactical display floating above his desk. The colony world glowed red, indicating danger. The fleet positions were marked in blue. I would send enough ships to win, but not so many that we leave gaps in our defenses. I would trust the officers you've trained to handle their assignments without your direct oversight. And I would remember that the goal isn't just to defeat the Vakari, it's to save the people on that colony world. If I divide the fleet and the Vakari attack elsewhere while we are spread thin, then we respond to that when it happens. But if you hold back forces because you're afraid of what might happen, people will die from what is happening right now. Zakros nodded slowly. You are right. I have been thinking like a general protecting assets. I should be thinking like a defender protecting people. He sent a strong but not overwhelming force to Haven's Rest. The battle was fierce, but the Defense Initiative ships drove off the Vakari attackers. The colony was saved with relatively few casualties. When the reports came back, Zakros stood in his command center surrounded by his officers. And Emma saw something she had never seen before. He smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. We did well today, he said to his assembled staff. Not I did well. That night, Emma found Zakros on one of the observation decks looking out at the stars. It was rare to see him outside of his office or the command center. Celebrating? Emma asked, walking up beside him. Reflecting, Zakros replied. Today we saved approximately 40,000 lives. It is a good day. It is. They stood in silence for a while, watching ships move through the darkness beyond the station windows. "Commander Wright," Zakros said finally, "may I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Why did you help me?" "That day in the negotiation chamber, you had no reason to intervene. It was not your responsibility. Yet you challenged me directly, risked your career, possibly your life. Why?" Emma thought about how to answer. "Do you remember what you said about the toy? About how I took it from the cub in the marketplace?" "Yes, that cub was scared. It was holding on to that toy because it was the only thing it felt it could control. Everything else in its world was bigger and stronger and potentially dangerous. But the toy was small and bright and it belonged to the cub. So it held on as tight as it could. You think I am like that cub? I think you were holding on to your grievance for the same reason. It gave you purpose in a world where you felt powerless. Your father controlled your childhood. Tradition controlled your duties, but the anger was yours. Nobody could take that away from you." Zakros was quiet for a long moment. "And now? Now you have a different kind of control. You get to decide what kind of leader you want to be, what kind of person you want to become. That's real power, Your Highness. Not the power to destroy your enemies, but the power to choose your own path. It is frightening sometimes, this freedom. It should be. Important choices always are." Zakros turned to look at her fully. "You spoke in the negotiation chamber about your brother. The one who taught you how to handle possessive children. What happened to him?" Emma smiled. "He grew up, stopped being so possessive, learned to share. Last I heard, he's teaching kindergarten back on Earth. Funny how things work out. And the toy he would not share? A plastic spaceship. Probably still has it somewhere, knowing Danny. Some toys you keep forever, but you stop growling over them. I understand the metaphor." Zakros looked back at the stars. "Commander Wright, I want to thank you. Not as a superior officer, but as someone who was shown a different path. You did not have to see past my anger. Most would not have. Most people are scared of growling predators. I just grew up with enough of them to know the difference between real danger and scared posturing. And which was I? Both, honestly. That's what made you dangerous. But it's also what made you reachable." They stood together on the observation deck, human and Draxian, looking at a galaxy that suddenly seemed a little bit safer. The next day brought new challenges. Pirates raided a supply convoy. A dispute broke out between two member species over mining rights. A Vicari scout ship was spotted near a major trade route. But Zakros faced each challenge with a little more confidence, a little more flexibility, a little more willingness to listen to advice. Emma watched him grow into his role, and she realized something important. She had not given Zakros a new purpose. She had just helped him see that he could choose one for himself. The toy had been put down, and in its place was something far more valuable, the freedom to decide who to become. 3 years passed like water flowing downstream, sometimes fast and turbulent, sometimes slow and peaceful. Emma Wright, now holding the rank of admiral, looked back on those years with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She had gone from a simple, cultural liaison to one of the most important figures in the Assembly Defense Initiative. The initiative itself had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a response to pirate raids and border incursions had become a true unified defense force. Ships from 17 different species flew together under the initiative's banner. Officers who once viewed each other as potential enemies now trained side by side, shared meals, and trusted each other with their lives. And at the center of it all was Zakros. He was no longer Crown Prince Zakros of the Draxian Empire. 2 years ago, he had formally abdicated his title, passing the crown to his younger cousin. The decision had shocked the Draxian court, but Zakros had been firm. He could not serve two masters, he had said. He was either the Crown Prince or the commander of the Defense Initiative. He could not be both. He had chosen the initiative. The Draxian Empire, under new leadership, had become one of the Assembly's strongest supporters. Trade flourished between species that had once been enemies. Peace, fragile but real, had taken root. Emma stood on the observation deck of Command Station Unity, the initiative's main headquarters. The station orbited a quiet blue star at the center of assembly space, perfectly positioned to respond to threats from any direction. Through the wide windows, she could see ships coming and going, a constant flow of traffic that never quite stopped. Her datapad chimed with a message. She glanced down and smiled. It was from Danny, who was now a major running security operations for the entire station. The message read, "Boss wants to see you. Command center. Says it's important." Emma made her way through the familiar corridors, nodding to officers and crew as she passed. After 3 years, Unity Station felt like home. She knew every shortcut, every good place to get coffee, every quiet spot where you could think without interruption. The command center was a massive circular room with screens covering every wall. At the center stood a raised platform where Zakros could oversee everything at once. It looked impressive, but Emma knew that Zakros preferred to walk among his officers, checking on them personally, rather than watching from above. She found him, doing exactly that, reviewing a tactical display with a young Kelvari lieutenant who looked nervous about presenting to the commander directly. "The supply route looks solid," Zakros was saying, his voice patient. "But have you considered what happens if there is bad weather at the transfer point? Do we have a backup location?" I had not thought of that, Commander," the lieutenant admitted. "Think of it now. Add 2 alternate transfer points to your plan and submit it again." "Yes, Commander. Thank you, Commander." The lieutenant hurried off, relief clear in the way her tail swished. Zakros turned to Emma and tilted his head in greeting. "Admiral Wright, thank you for coming. Your message made it sound urgent. What's going on? Walk with me." They left the command center and headed toward one of the quieter sections of the station. Zakros did not speak until they were alone in a conference room with the door sealed. "I received a communication this morning," Zakros said, settling into a chair that was reinforced to handle his weight. "From my homeworld. The new emperor wishes to establish a permanent embassy on Unity Station." "That's good news, isn't it? Shows that the Draxian Empire is committed to the assembly, perhaps. Or perhaps it is an attempt to keep watch on me, to ensure I have not forgotten my duties to my people." Emma sat down across from him. After 3 years of working together, she had learned to read his moods. He was troubled by something deeper than just an embassy. "What's really bothering you?" she asked. Zakros was quiet for a moment, his claws tapping lightly against the table. "Do you remember what you said to me, that day in the negotiation chamber? You asked what would happen when I got my revenge, what I would become after." "I remember. I have been thinking about that question again. Not about revenge, but about purpose. I am no longer Crown Prince. I have fulfilled my duty to the initiative. We have driven back the Vakari, reduced piracy by 70%, and established real cooperation between species that once hated each other. The mission I chose is largely complete." Emma felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Are you saying you want to leave?" "I am saying I do not know what comes next. For 3 years I have had clear purpose. Now that purpose is achieved and I find myself uncertain again. Just as I was uncertain when you first challenged me to put down my anger. Zakros, the work isn't done. There are still threats out there. The galaxy still needs the initiative." "The galaxy needs the initiative, yes. But does it need me?" Zakros looked at her with those amber eyes that had once held only anger, and now held something much more complicated. "I have built something good here. I do not wish to destroy it by staying too long, by becoming the general who cannot let go of command. Better to step down while my work is still respected than to wait until I become an obstacle." Emma leaned back in her chair, processing this. "Have you made a decision?" "No. That is why I wanted to speak with you. You have guided me through every major choice I have faced since we met. You showed me how to put down one toy. Perhaps you can help me understand when to put down another." "I don't think this is the same situation." "No. I'm holding on to something because I fear what I will be without it." That sounds familiar. Emma had to admit he had a point. "Okay. Let's think about this differently. What do you want? Not what your duty demands. Not what others expect. What do you actually want to do?" Zakros was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I want to teach." "Teach?" "I have learned much about leadership these past 3 years. about compromise and cooperation, about seeing past anger to understanding. These are lessons my people struggle with. The Draxian Empire is strong, but it is rigid. If I could teach others what you taught me, perhaps I could do more good than commanding fleets. Emma felt something shift in her chest. 3 years ago, if someone had told her that Crown Prince Zakros would want to become a teacher, she would have laughed at the absurdity. Now it made perfect sense. Then that's what you should do, she said simply. It feels like abandonment, like I am running away from responsibility. No, it's recognizing that responsibilities change. You built the initiative. Now it needs someone to maintain what you built, and you need to do something that challenges you in new ways. That's not abandonment, that's growth. Zakros's scales rippled, a sign of emotion. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Hard, but simple. You put down the toy of revenge and picked up leadership. Now you're ready to put down command and pick up teaching. Same pattern, different stage of life. And what of the initiative? Who could replace me? There are a dozen qualified officers who could take command. Lieutenant Commander Varys from the Kelvari fleet has been your second for 2 years. She's brilliant and everyone respects her. Or there's General Cross from the human contingent. Even Danny could probably do it if we promoted him enough times. Zakros made a sound that might have been a laugh. Major Martinez as Supreme Commander. That would be interesting. Terrifying, but interesting. Emma agreed with a smile. They sat together in comfortable silence. Finally, Zakros stood. I will consider this carefully. The decision is not urgent, but it is important. Thank you, Admiral Wright. Once again, you have shown me a path I could not see on my own. That's what friends do. Zakros paused at the door. Is that what we are? Friends? I'd like to think so, unless you still want to execute me for insubordination. The thought crossed my mind. Several times, actually. But yes, I believe we are friends. It is a strange concept for me. Draxians do not typically form friendships across species. Well, you're not a typical Draxian anymore. No, Zakros agreed. I suppose I am not. 2 months later, the assembly held another ceremony. This one was different from the celebration 3 years ago. This one had an edge of sadness mixed with the pride. Commander Zakros stood before the assembled delegates and formally announced his resignation from the Defense Initiative. He would return to the Draxian Empire, he explained, to establish a new academy focused on teaching the next generation of leaders. The academy would be open to all species, not just Draxians. It would teach tactics and strategy, but also diplomacy and cooperation. I have learned, Zakros said in his speech, that the greatest battles are not fought with weapons, but with words. The strongest defenses are not built from metal and energy shields, but from trust and mutual understanding. I wish to pass these lessons to others, so that future generations might avoid the mistakes of the past. Emma watched from the crowd as Lieutenant Commander Varys was sworn in as the new Supreme Commander. The young Kelvari looked nervous but determined. She would do well, Emma thought. Zakros had trained her personally. After the ceremony, Emma found Zakros in his old office, packing the few personal items he had accumulated over 3 years. It was not much. A few data crystals, a ceremonial blade from the Draxian court, and a small holographic projector. Traveling light? Emma asked from the doorway. I find I have little attachment to material things, a side effect of my